The Geography of Survival, a comparative study of the ultimate logistical chains. Chapter 2, Logistics, the Calories of Civilization. Act 3, The Synthesis. The terrifying fragility of the modern global fertilizer supply chain is not without a direct and chilling historical precedent. To look upon the massive, steel cargo ships idling nervously in the waters outside the Strait of Hormuz is to look into a flawless mirror reflecting the anxieties of the ancient world. Over 2 millennia ago, the grand city of Rome stood as the undisputed, triumphant master of the Mediterranean world, an imperial core boasting a staggering urban population of roughly 1 million citizens. It was a city of unparalleled monumental architecture, vast wealth, and overwhelming political power, yet it was built entirely upon a foundation of logistical sand. Rome had completely and hopelessly outgrown the natural agricultural carrying capacity of the Italian peninsula. It was a sprawling, ravenous metropolis that produced virtually no food of its own, surviving entirely and exclusively on the continuous, unbroken, maritime importation of foreign calories. To prevent mass starvation and the immediate, violent collapse of civic order, the Roman state was forced to establish the Cura Annani. This was a massive, unprecedented logistical apparatus specifically designed to procure, transport, and distribute heavily subsidized, and later entirely free, grain to hundreds of thousands of urban citizens. At the absolute head of this vital operation was the prefect of the grain supply, an immensely powerful official personally chosen by the emperor himself. This official held a prestigious rank second only to the prefect of Egypt, highlighting the supreme importance of his duties. The elevation of a mere logistical officer to the highest echelons of the imperial government underscores a universal, inescapable truth. Managing the supply chain was not merely a mundane administrative duty. It was the very mechanism of political survival. A failure of the annona did not mean a temporary recession. It meant the utter, bloody ruin of the state. Rome's absolute, existential dependence on imported energy was tethered directly to the ancient world's ultimate geographic battery, the Nile Delta. Every single year, a massive maritime armada known as the Alexandrian Grain Fleet was tasked with moving millions of bushels of Egyptian wheat across the treacherous expanse of the Mediterranean Sea to the bustling Roman ports of Puteoli and Ostia. The ships that comprised this vital fleet were the literal supertankers of antiquity. Detailed historical accounts provided by ancient writers such as Lucian of Samosata vividly describe vessels such as the Isis, an absolute maritime leviathan. The Isis measured an astonishing 180 feet in length, boasted a beam of over 45 feet in width, and featured a cavernous cargo hold plunging 44 feet in depth from deck to keel. Adorned with a lofty, curving stern, a brilliant gilded beak, and a towering mast supported by incredibly thick forestays, the Isis was an engineering marvel capable of carrying over 1,200 tons of life-saving grain in a single, perilous voyage. However, the arduous journey from the ports of Alexandria to the shores of Rome was a continuous, harrowing fight against foul winds and highly unpredictable seas. The safe sailing season was incredibly brief, and ships traveling while heavily laden with dense cargo could take over a month, and sometimes up to a terrifying 70 days to finally reach the Italian coast. During this time, the vessels were constantly threatened by sudden storms, navigating errors, and the ever-present danger of piracy. The emperor's absolute power, the stability of the ancient Senate, and the very lives of 1 million Roman citizens depended entirely on the fickle weather patterns off the coast of North Africa. When the winds failed to blow, or when late autumn gales destroyed the vulnerable convoy at sea, the localized panic in the capital was immediate, violent, and visceral. The historical accounts, meticulously preserved by the biographer Suetonius and the historian Tacitus, paint a remarkably vivid picture of this extreme vulnerability during the turbulent reign of the Emperor Claudius. Due to a highly disappointing agricultural harvest in other supporting provinces and a severe, weather-induced delay in the arrival of the Alexandrian grain fleet, the city's vital food reserves dwindled to a terrifyingly low margin of a mere 15 days. The sudden realization that the glittering capital of the world was exactly 2 weeks away from absolute mass starvation sent violent shockwaves through the hungry populace. An enraged, desperate mob completely cornered the Emperor Claudius in the center of the Roman Forum, shouting vicious abuses and physically hurling stale crusts of bread at the most powerful man on the face of the earth. The terrified emperor was nearly trampled to death by his own citizens and barely managed to escape into the fortified safety of the imperial palace, saved only by the swift, violent intervention of his armed military guards. In direct response to this existential, logistical terror, Claudius immediately offered massive, unprecedented financial inducements and personally assumed all maritime insurance risks for any merchants willing to build new ships and brave the deadly winter storms to import grain. The image of the starving mob pelting the Emperor Claudius with stale bread in the Roman Forum is the exact, unvarnished historical equivalent of modern governments panicking uncontrollably over a sudden geopolitical spike in the price of natural gas. Today, when a military crisis threatens to permanently close the Strait of Hormuz, we generally do not throw crusts of bread at our political leaders, but the underlying systemic terror is perfectly identical. Instead of a physical, localized shortage manifesting as a violent riot in the public square, the panic quietly manifests as a crippling wave of energy-driven economic inflation. Just as the price of vital wheat skyrocketed in the chaotic markets of the ancient Mediterranean during a maritime delay, the benchmark price of agricultural urea leaps by more than 30% in a matter of weeks when the Persian Gulf is militarily threatened. This rapid inflation is a brutal, entirely invisible tax that ripples destructively through the interconnected global economy, violently squeezing the profit margins of Brazilian soybean farmers and forcing massive Indian agricultural cooperatives to desperately ration their limited supplies. It is the modern, undeniable manifestation of the logistical trap in action. Despite our orbiting satellites, our high-frequency algorithmic trading, and our absolute scientific mastery of the Haber-Bosch chemical synthesis, we are no more independent of raw geography than the ancient sailors who navigated the great ship Isis by the light of the stars. When we carefully synthesize the realities of these two distant eras, a profound and deeply humbling truth emerges from the historical record. Whether the precious commodity in question is a simple calorie of Egyptian wheat grown in the dark, alluvial mud of the Nile Delta, or a complex jewel of hydrocarbon energy pumped from the deep, ancient bedrock of the Arabian Peninsula, the fundamental mechanics of human civilization remain perfectly unchanged. We continuously build massive, intricate, highly populated societies that are located incredibly far removed from the actual environmental sources of our physical survival, and we attempt to connect the two with terribly fragile, easily severed threads of maritime commerce. The geographic path that the commodity must inevitably travel remains the true, undisputed master of human history. From the ancient, predictable trade winds of the Indian Ocean to the narrow, contested shipping lanes of the Strait of Hormuz, we are forever bound by the rigid geography of survival, perpetually standing on the shore, desperately waiting for the ships to arrive.